Yeah. Okay, welcome to a presentation on Memoir versus Autobiography by Jody Savage, part of the Writers Morning Out thing on July 15th, 2023. Jody, it's all yours.
Thank you, George. Thanks everybody for being here. And as George said, if you have had a chance to print out the second page of the handout, that'll be really helpful today. We're also going to do an exercise later in the workshop that involves drawing. So if you have a pen or pencil and a blank sheet of paper handy, that will be very useful later in the workshop, assuming we get to everything I'm hoping to do today. So I'm going to see if I can share screen. Here we go. All right, can everybody see a slide that says memoir versus autobiography?
Yes.
That shows up for you. Good. All right. So, and that's exactly what we're talking about today. We're going to compare and contrast memoir and autobiography. And then we're going to do two exercises that will be potentially useful to you no matter which way you go. So let's start off with a comparison. So some people use these terms interchangeably, but and you can see why. If you look at, oh, no, let's go back. If you look at the left side of the slide, there are a lot of similarities between the two forms. They're both based on life events. When people talk about memoir or autobiography, they're categorized in a literary sense as creative nonfiction, and both are typically written in the first person. So that's a lot to have in common, but they also differ in some important ways. A memoir is typically based on a significant event in a person's life or a closely linked series of events in a person's life, whereas an autobiography is the full meal from soup to nuts. It tells the full story of a lifetime. So that's really different in terms of, for one thing, in terms of story arc. So if you think about the way people typically portray a story arc in a novel, let me skip ahead for a second and show you this graphic, and I apologize for the little train. This is from this is from a teacher work website. I think it's geared to fourth graders. So you can see the little train is about to start climbing up up to the crisis point in the story, and then the little train will climb back down again. But anytime you look at a story arc explanation or graphic, it's going to show basically this pattern where there's exposition, there's explanation about characters and setting, and things get dicier and dicier till they get to a crisis point, and then there's a resolution. So again, a memoir is set up like a modern novel. A memoir typically has one single story arc that starts with exposition and, you know, setting up the conflict, and then you have the conflict, and then you have the resolution, and you come back down. And so that's different from an autobiography, which is typically set up or can be set up as a series of arcs, more like if you've ever studied about picaresque novels. I don't know how many literary nerds there are here, but okay, very good. So a picaresque novel is an early form of the novel, and it's kind of almost like what we would consider now to be a volume of linked short stories. So instead, if you can picture, instead of having one big story arc like we just looked at with the little train, if you think about a series of story arcs like this, it's more like the waves, the little wavelets you'd see in a bay, as opposed to the big wave you might see in the ocean. So that's a big difference between memoir and autobiography. Another thing that often comes up in talking about the differences between these two forms is that a memoir can be written really by anybody with an interesting life story. I think probably everybody in the world has one or more than one interesting, bizarre, weird conflict incident that has happened in their life that would make for an interesting memoir. But autobiography, on the other hand, is often thought of as the province of famous people. Autobiographies are typically written by celebrities, politicians, so, you know, famous folks, and often they involve ghost writers, helping out with the writing of the autobiography. And in the handout, it talks about, there's a New Yorker article that came out recently by the ghostwriter for Spare, which is Prince Harry's autobiography. I recommend the article, very interesting about the role of the ghostwriter in putting together a volume like this. So those are some basic differences between the two. Now, why is it that I can't? Oh, here we go. And we've already talked about this slide, the arc of this modern novel or memoir. And as I said, and I couldn't unfortunately find a graphic for autobiography, but as I said earlier, it's more like a series of waves as opposed to one big wave like you would see in the ocean or in a novel. Okay, so let's talk about how we create these two forms. And there's a lot in common, and we'll discuss that. And in terms of building an autobiography, I wanted to say that just because autobiography is typically written by famous people, and when you read about what is an autobiography, it'll often talk about authorship by famous people. If you want to write your autobiography, don't let that stop you, because an autobiography can be published, or it also can become a legacy for family members, so that people in your family or your friends can understand what your life is like or was like. And it's an important legacy for a lot of people to write an autobiography. So, you know, I think it's time to democratize the whole idea of autobiography.
Okay.
So one of my favorite books on autobiography is Your Life as Story by Tristine Rayner. So talking about how you build an autobiography, she asks her readers to write down their stepping stones, as she calls them, which are the main incidents in their lives on which to build autobiography. And then the book really is about taking those stepping stones, those big events, and creating story around those big events and linking them together. So in the end, you would come up with what we were talking about earlier, the series of waves, the series of story arcs. Another completely different approach is in a book called Writing Your Legacy by Campbell and Svensson, who are affiliated with an autobiography center in California. And they, in their book, provide a really different method for writing autobiography. And their method involves writing essays about your life based on different themes. If you follow the guidance in that book, what you would end up with is an autobiography that isn't chronological. So this is very interesting. This is very different from the typical expectation for autobiography. You would end up with a book that would have a chapter on work, a chapter on romance, a chapter on family, etc. And in their book, they have guidance on how to structure an autobiography in that way. And another book that I didn't list here that came out from that same center in California, that autobiography center, is focused on writing groups and having writing guided autobiography in groups and then sharing. So if you go through a group process like that, and I've had a chance to lead a group process like that, it was very interesting. people will come in each week with an essay on a different life subject and then share them with each other. And that's actually a really fascinating way to get to know people. And it's also a great way to build autobiography. That's a very different structure than what you might expect. But interestingly enough, even Campbell and Swenson, who end up recommending this, instead of the episodic approach, recommending this themed approach to autobiography, even they start with an initial exercise that's actually a lot like what Christine Rayner recommends, only instead of calling it stepping stones, they call it, here we go, if I can get to the next slide, they call it your life graph. And this is the graph that's in your handout. This is page 2 of your handout. And what I would like to do, but I want to check in with everybody here. I would like to talk about doing this as taking time in this workshop to do this. But I want to talk with you about that because we have just under 45 minutes now, and this is one of 2 exercises. So we could take 10 minutes to do this, or we can keep going with the slides and information and folks can circle back later. Did anybody do this ahead of time? Did anybody do a life graph ahead of time?
Sorry.
No, no. There was no expectation that you would do that. I just was curious if somebody had sort of jumped ahead and done that. Okay, so what do you think, folks? Do you want to keep plowing ahead and then do the life graph later, so you're not under time pressure to do it? Maybe that would be better. I can show you mine that I did when I was leading a series of workshops, like a 6 workshop series based on the guided autobiography book. So let's do that. Okay, so I'm going to go back to sharing then. Okay, can you folks see the slide again?
Yep.
All right. Okay, so if we're going to do this way, then I just want to give you some advice. Take the time to complete yours. Please do this. It's just a fascinating exercise. And keep in mind, so look at the way this thing is set up. This thing is set up with the x-axis has ages, basically from 0 to 100. The y-axis has this 0 line at the midpoint from left to right. And then it has negative experiences down below, positive experiences up above, which is great. And you end up with a graph that really shows how you've experienced your life. But keep in mind that the negative peaks are at least as important for writing story as the positive ones.
Oh, yeah.
Think about how the typical story arc runs. If you were writing a novel, you would probably choose a negative point as your climax of your story. You'd have the lead up, the crisis, and the resolution. You wouldn't maybe pick one of the positive points as your centerpiece for your memoir. So let's look at an example. I'm just going to show mine as an example. Okay, but please do circle back and do this. Okay, here's mine. And actually, I didn't include the directions on the other one. So George, I can probably send people this slide deck, can't I?
Yeah, and I think you have to do that through Carol because I don't get the contact who gets sent out. But
okay, all right, I'll talk to Carol.
Or if there are people on here that didn't come in through the email, but you recommended, they can put it in the chat or send it just to you in the chat.
Okay.
To now.
All right.
So
great. Okay. So let me read you I don't know if you could, I don't know what your resolution is on your screen, but the thing says, on the graph, place a dot at your age for each major event or branching point in your life, or branching point or stepping stone, as the other author would call it. Judge the event for the way you felt about it, plus or minus. How positive or negative do you feel about the event? Connect the dots representing major events in your life to create your lifeline. Draw a vertical line for your present age and project your lifeline into the future. How long do you expect to live, and how do you expect to feel about the years ahead? And then what I did was, in addition to graphing it out, I put down the points down below where I had significant events. So if you notice, at my age 55, there is a dip that is on a par with my expected death at age 95. So that's what my memoir is about, is that point where the negative was at its, the very most negative event of my life became the basis for the memoir. So the other thing to notice here, or that I notice anyway, about this life graph, is how unrelated these stories are. So, there's the one that I based the memoir on, which was an infestation of Dermanissus gallini, which is a red mite, and the divorce that came after that was related to that. But then, there's a story about my son being diagnosed with cerebral palsy. There's a story about adopting a baby from Vietnam. There are, some big pluses, big minuses. And when I look at this, one of the things that strikes me is it would be tough to create one consistent narrative out of this. I can see where a person could write a series of stories that were sort of kind of linked, but it doesn't look to me like, for me, writing an autobiography is less appealing to me than writing either memoir about different events or writing autofiction based on those events. Oh, so there's a cover of my first book, the scientific memoir, The Year of the Mite, that came out in 2016. Does anybody have any, before we go on, let's see, how do we get back? Here we go. Does anybody have any questions about this, since we're not actually going to do this during this workshop? Let me stop sharing for a minute and see, does anybody want to ask anything about this?
I want to say, I just want to say that, Jody, that seeing your list really changed what I was thinking about I was going to do with that.
Okay.
Because the detail, and it suddenly caused for me to go, oh yeah. And then I thought about my life differently because of the things you wrote in terms of what I would write on that. So
Okay.
that illustration helped me. I don't know about anybody else, but it did for me.
Okay. Well, good. I'm glad to have decided to I sort of dropped it in there at the last minute. So I'm glad that was helpful.
Okay, and just let me interrupt our flow here and welcome Joy Hewitt, who has arrived. I think she's frozen.
Hi,
No,
Joy.
she's there. She's smiling. She came in a little late. Good to see you, Joy.
Welcome.
I have a first draft of a memoir completed that I've been calling a memoir, and I'm afraid it's really an autobiography. Thank you so much.
Oh, well, that's nothing to be afraid of. Really. Like I said, I think we should be recapturing the autobiography genre from the famous people and making it our own.
Yeah, well, and I had the wicked thought, well, if you write a good enough autobiography, it might make you famous.
That's right. It could.
But I'm in a critique group where two of the three other people are writing memoirs that conform to your definition of memoir.
Okay.
Which is because Tom Dow's memoir is about his 17 years teaching English as a second language in Japan.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very contained thematic approach.
Right.
And Carol's memoir is about her experience with traumatic brain injury, and it covers years, but it's thematic. Mine is definitely picaresque.
Okay.
Don Quixote is an example of a picaresque novel. Haven't read it
Yes,
in
I,
a
you know, I
long,
was
long
wondering,
time.
I was thinking, I knew there was some famous example. Thank you. It's
That,
done.
that's
Yeah,
one. I mean, there's several. It
yeah,
was very popular before, in the early days of the novel, because
right.
what unifies a picaresque novel is just the central character. It has a central character who
Okay.
has adventures.
Yes, but is it also that there's a quest?
Well, it can be, it often is, yeah.
Yeah. Do you hear that?
No.
Good. That just turned on the stereo. I don't think he meant to do that. I don't
No,
think he
I don't
has it
think,
on.
I don't think.
I might move rooms. All right. We'll
We're
see.
back to you.
You're
We're back to
not
you.
hearing it? It's jazz. It's really loud. No?
That's
No.
Okay. All right. Good.
back to you,
And
Jody.
Can I ask
but
a question?
yeah, okay.
Question. So, a book of collected pieces that somebody writes from their own life, and I'm
Yes.
thinking of one. I'm thinking of the Anne Patchett, These Precious Days, which are all
Okay.
stories from her life, different times, different places. Each one's I don't know if it's essay or memoir or if it's both. But so would that be a picaresque?
No, actually, no, it would not. That would be, because picaresque is an early form of the novel. And what you're talking about is a collection of personal essays,
Mhm.
which, and we're really glad you brought that up, because that's another way to go, isn't it? You don't have to write straight autobiography. You can write it as a series of what Tristan, what's her name? Rayner would call stepping stones. You can just do the stepping stones. Or you can do essays based on different aspects of your life and not put them in chronological order at all, which I bet is what she did.
So
So
all of that is autobiography as opposed to memoir.
I think that's a really good question. If you write a series of personal essays and publish it as a collection, I don't think anybody would call that an autobiography. I think
I don't know
they
if
would
anyone
call
would
it an
care,
essay
would they?
collection.
Would
Huh?
anyone care? Would anyone care?
I don't think anybody would. I think it's fine. You
Okay.
know, I mean, really, let's just reclaim all this stuff. Why not? So yes, I think a person who isn't famous but publishes a collection of personal essays, that's a great thing to do. And it doesn't have to be, there's a fine line, isn't there, between memoir and personal essay. And I have not studied up on what a personal essay is, but who's doing a lot of work with that right now is Rachel Bussell Kramer. She's doing classes on this online that are not expensive. She's doing, I think she started publishing a series of them from different people submitting them. She's doing a lot of work with this. She is best known as the editor of, there's a book that comes out every year called Best Women's Erotica of, and then whatever the year is. Has anybody read any of those? And she's kind of switching gears a little bit. I think she's still doing collections of erotica, but she's also gotten very interested in the personal essay as a form of writing. So if you're interested in that, I'd recommend looking her up, and I can share some resources about that. Not during this workshop, but later.
Thank you.
Jody, just essays, I missed Judith's explanation, but essays expressing your opinion on philosophical things don't strike me as being either memoir or autobiography.
No,
Right.
that's right. Again, there's a fine line here, isn't there? If you're writing about, like I've written about some health experiences I've had, and then kind of taken it further and written about how different aspects of the medical profession handle those experiences or those issues, especially that women bring to the healthcare industry. And so that's like in between, isn't it? If you're writing about something that happened to you, but then you're connecting it with something that's happening in society. Like, if you're talking about medical gaslighting, but you're also talking about your own experience with medical gaslighting. That's neither fish nor fowl, is it? I think that's where the personal essay comes in.
Okay.
Because you're talking about your experience, but you're talking about it in the context of a societal or sociological issue.
Rather than historical.
Rather than historical, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sure that was what I had to say was clear as mud. And let's continue. Let's see. I'm going to share screen again, unless anybody else has questions, but I think we're good. Let's see. Okay. So we talked about my story arc. We talked about that led to my first book under a different pen name than I usually use. And we're not going to do this today because it seems like folks are going to take more time and really go through their life graphs on their own. But I do encourage you to do this. It is a fascinating exercise to sort of lay out your whole life on a single page. It really makes a lot of things clearer than they otherwise might have been.
Your illustration really did bring life to that and made me think, oh, I really do need to do this. After I
Yeah, me too.
Well, good. I hope everybody does. It's again, it's better than therapy and a lot cheaper. Okay, so this brings us to our second exercise. And I hope we can do this one. Well, we're only at 1:30, folks, so we certainly have time. What we can do, if you're up for this, is to take a piece of paper and think about it a significant time in your life. I know we haven't all done the exercise yet with the graph, but think about a time in your life that was significant. It could be when you were a kid, just your first room when you were a kid. It could be a room that was significant at a very happy point in your life, at a very unhappy or crisis point in your life, and draw the room. You can do it either looking at it from the side as if you were painting the room, or you can do it top down as if you were drawing a floor plan, and put in windows, furniture, rugs, curtains. If you're doing it from the side, put in the decorations that were on the wall. Draw stick figures, if you're like me, and that's what you can do, drawing people, of the people that you associate with the room, and then list out on the sides of the picture the sensory details. We talk a lot when we talk about writing. We talk about the importance of conveying to your reader the reality of what you're talking about by saying what it sounded like, what it smelled like. Did you used to eat in this room? What taste do you associate with this room? What music was playing oftentimes in this room? And then so if we can take a few minutes and start doing that, and then I'd like us to talk with each other about our drawings. And then after our workshop, take this drawing and use it as a writing prompt. And again, this is an exercise that can work whether you're writing memoir or autobiography, or to Judith's point, whether you're writing a personal essay. Just having that sensation, that experience of being back in a room that was important in your life can really evoke some interesting and powerful writing.
So what do you think, Jody? 10 minutes? Is that too much?
I think 10 minutes is great. I think 10 minutes will allow everybody to, and allow everybody to really get into this. And this is not about artistic ability. If it were about artistic ability, I would not do it or ask anybody else to do it. This is about evoking a moment in your life. All right, so I'm going to shut up. If everybody's willing, I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes and we will reconvene then.
Doing it.
Hmm.
Okay, our time is about up. Take a minute or two, and finish up your last sentence or so, and then we'll talk about this. Al, thanks for joining us. We're doing the exercise where we draw a room that was significant at a turning point in our lives.
Thank you.
Now, the tricky thing, I think, is going to be to share these. I don't know how, let's see, I'll show. This probably doesn't, can you see this? I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Can you?
Can't
Okay,
see the writing, but you can't see where the words are. You can see the drawing.
you can see that. Okay, all right, good. All right, well, I'm not going to go first because I want to invite folks in. So, oh, Joy, very good.
Joy is ready.
Joy's ready to go. Joy, tell us about your room.
Pull it away a little bit, Joy. Just no, not that far. Just a little bit up, raise it up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm trying to coordinate hand-eye coordination
Getting
and
it. Now,
Let's see.
slightly to your left and slightly away.
Very slightly away, too
That's it.
far away. A little
A little more
closer.
to your left. There you go.
Okay. This is good. Tell us about this room. I can't read what it says at the bottom. What does it say?
dining room 1955,
Oh, what town is it in?
Louisville, Georgia.
Oh, great. Great. Tell us about the room that you drew.
Well, I was trying to write a piece about my father's suicide, and this was the last time I saw him in that room.
Oh, wow.
So, but it stopped me cold when a friend wanted me to read what I'd written out loud, and I realized I'm not ready to read it out loud.
Well, yeah. Wow. It's wonderful that you wrote it. That must have taken a lot of courage to write that. Do you want to say about the physical room? Are there any details that you want to share about the room itself?
Well, it had a dining room table. It had mama's lace curtains. I guess one of the significant features was over the mantelpiece was a painting my mother had painted of mother deer, a doe, and two fawns in a standing in shallow water with lily pads and stuff like that. Very
Oh.
green. It was an oil painting. It was over the mantelpiece.
Oh, that's great. That is great. Is there anything else you want to say about the room, about how it smelled or the kinds of foods that you ate there, or what kinds of
My mother was a great cook, so lots of good food.
like
We
what?
ate on the back table, in a little kitchenette in the back. Not so the dining room, I would guess, would be fabulous. Christmas and Thanksgiving meals, more fancy birthday parties, that sort of thing.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you so much, Joy, for sharing that. Is there anything else you want to say about your drawing and about that room?
No, it had a lot of doors. It had 1, 2, 3. It had 4 doors.
Were they all standard size, or were some of them like those old wooden sliding doors?
No sliding doors. 1 to the screen porch, 1 to the hall, 1 to the large one to the living room, and 1 to the kitchen.
Okay, okay.
I didn't think about how many doors it had till I started drawing it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's the interesting thing about this exercise, is how it brings us back into the physical place. And then when we write, we're writing from that place. Thank you, Joy, for sharing that. Anybody else want to share about a room? Judith, thank you.
Let's see. It's sort of like notes in drawing. Up, down. Wait,
Let me get you, make you big picture.
sorry.
It's great.
You can choose in your view to have the prominent person and be the speaker. Like if you choose speaker and then Judith, you say something, then that takes the whole screen almost. It's really easier to read it.
Ah,
Is my placement okay?
So
yeah,
yeah, it would, but now you
Great.
have to say something again, I guess.
this is great. So what is
I'm
that?
I'm not seeing Judith.
It's that she's Judith too.
There are
Oh,
two Judiths, yeah.
It's hard on both of us.
What I noticed first of all as I did it was it's the room I grew up in, which was a living dining room, and it was tiny. And as I drew it, I realized I had this much more space in the picture than we really had. And I after I did all these little detail things, I mean, there's the basic dining room, one love seat, one chair, and that was really it. And that's where we lived the whole time. What I realized was there was really nothing. First of all, I thought there was nothing of my mother's. There was my dad, there was a bookcase, there was his pipes, there was his beer, usually on the hearth and so on. But I couldn't think of anything of my mother's until I thought, well, in the evening, she marked books. She was an elementary teacher, so there was that. But there was actually nothing of ours, my sister or mine. And we didn't have like a room that was big enough to do anything in. We played outside and we played on this veranda out here, which was, plastic tiles curling up and sort of,
Hmm.
it was awful, but that's where we played. And and then there were these awful paintings that some relative had painted. They were dark, still life, browns and things. But then there was one of those mirrors where you look fat in the middle. And my sister and I used to dance in the middle, to pop music. And so we had all these different shapes. And there was a step down here to the tiniest kitchen I've probably ever seen. You could stand in the middle and you could touch it in all directions. And then here were French windows out to the veranda. And from the veranda was a lovely big garden. By garden, I mean backyard, a lawn and then another lawn that we played in, all weathers. So the fireplace, it's interesting that we had a coal fire, except when parents were at work and stuff during the day. And so I could even see like the little thing where we kept the library tickets. But I couldn't remember what they had above the fireplace. Oh, they had a mirror. There was a mirror.
Ah.
There was a mirror. And, in here, there were boxes of toys. But I mean, other than that, there was nothing left around. There was no real evidence that children lived there looking back. So I guess we did lots of creative, dramatic play in our dressing up bin, big dustbin with plastic. We had all these clothes in. But I guess, in here, there was nowhere really. I mean, I suppose sometimes we lay on the floor and read. I don't really remember what we did in there, other than when we were teenagers and we were dancing and stuff. And we lived in there. There was one other room that was the best room that nobody ever went in. So, and that was by American today's standards, that was small. This was tiny.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, lots of details that came back to me.
Mhm.
Get a lot-
Yeah, and it's really interesting what you said about the size and how when you drew it, it looked bigger. Do you think, I mean, how old were you when you moved there? Or
My mum, they got married in the early 20s. My mum died there at 80.
Oh, so you had your whole childhood there.
Yeah, and I have this absolute thing. I don't need like a big house, but a big room, spacious. I need spaciousness.
Mhm.
And I think it often goes back to the place. I mean, there was hardly any room in the middle. And we were all cramped in there, mum, dad, and two kids.
did you have a bedroom of your own?
I had a bedroom that had a bed in it and about 2 feet along the side. I didn't have like a wardrobe. I had to put my clothes in my sister's room, which had 2 single beds and a little gap in between. I mean, it was a small English semi-detached house. My dad was an accountant, my mum was a teacher, so we weren't poor. But after World War II, I guess it's just sort of what people lived in.
Yeah. And do you think that when you drew it and it looked bigger than it was, I'm wondering if that's because when you were a little child, it might have looked bigger than it was.
I don't think so. I mean, when I
Okay.
went back, when I'd been in the States a couple of years and I went back, I was horrified about how small it was.
Yeah, yeah.
But, you know, it's always where I visited my parents after I was 17. Whenever I went home, I visited them. So I had it in my bones my whole life. So
Mhm.
anyway, lots of, memories of details that I wouldn't otherwise have thought of.
Yeah, yeah, that's
And
great.
there was also quite a lot of violence in this room.
Mm.
So, which are things I've written about at different times.
Mhm.
But I could take the green chair and write 3 stories about it. I could take, as lots of details that have stories.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for sharing, Judith. We have just a few, if my clock is right, we have about 4 minutes left.
Oh, wow.
Is there anybody who'd like to share perhaps succinctly about their rooms, or we can close out a different way? I see Judith stirring, the other Judith.
Well, I managed this, which was the bedroom I shared with my grandmother when I was,
Can you
Move
hold
it
it
up
up
a
a
little,
little
move
bit?
it up, and there you go. That's
There you
better.
go. Okay, yep.
and it was great fun to revisit it, because I still have the curly bed that I've drawn there in the middle. It's an old spool bed, and I still have it, and I slept in it for years after I got it back. And then over in, oh, it reverses itself. Over on what you see is the right side is my piano was in her room. And so I practiced piano from 8 years old until I went to college in that room. That was the only noise. It was a very, very quiet room. And there was only one piece of artwork in it. And that was kind of my main point in drawing this. And she lived with this all of her life, and I did too. And it was an oval portrait of her second son, who was killed in France in the last month of the war, World War II. And she lived with that all of her life over her bed. And I've written poems about several things in that room. So it was a very productive exercise for me. I had one more thing I wanted to say, if I may add to your recommendations. What I've been reading on memoir is Mary Carr.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you know her. She's The Art of Memoir by Mary Carr, Karr.
Yeah, it's on the first page of your handout.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm just seconding that then. I'm seconding
I
your
love that.
recommendation for it.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
She's one of the things that I like about it is people always ask her, can I use real names of other people? And she solves that problem by asking them, duh. And if they don't want her to use their real name, she invites them to make up a name. And she says they absolutely love making up a name for themselves.
Oh, that's great. What a
So
great idea.
she teaches at Syracuse University. She's head of the creative writing program, and she has a memoir course that basically people have to apply for. And when she offers it, it's just crowded. She has to turn people away. But she has this book on memoir and 2 other books that are her own memoirs. I've got them all, and I have to read them. But anyway, this has been illuminating, Jody. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome, Judith. And since we're talking about books, I want to mention the one other book that's on the first page of your handout. That handout page lists Your Life as Story and Writing Your Legacy, both of which we've talked about extensively today. And it mentions The Art of Memoir, which we did not get to. So thank you, Judith. And the only other book on here is called Old Friend from Far Away, and it's by Natalie Goldberg.
It is.
Ah, there you go. Thank you. Thank you.
As a matter of fact, that exercise we did today is in here.
Oh, the drawing of the room.
Right, yes.
Oh, here now, I think I made it up.
She wrote Writing Down the Bones, which is a great
Right.
book also. Writing Down the Bones, it's sort of like a journal writing, and she has you be in place because she was Buddhist, and be here now. You always started with sensory impressions
Mhm.
and then moved on.
Yeah,
So
and writing down the bones. When I was in college studying writing, all the professors were male, and that book was the first time that I had information or input from a female writer about writing.
Wow.
Excuse me. So,
And what's her name?
pardon, Natalie Goldberg.
Yeah,
It's again, this is, if you have the handout, Judith. this
yeah.
is the front page of the handout. It talks about Natalie Goldberg's book, Old Friend from Far Away. Excuse me. But of course, her most famous book is Writing Down the Bones.
Well, what about that one? Was it good? What did you like about it?
Oh, this
The-
this one?
Yes.
There's
Friend.
a number of exercises, just like what we just did.
Oh,
It
okay.
prompts you and it just causes you to go deep inside your memory. It's wonderful. I recommend this one.
Very
Okay.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Mhm.
That is fabulous. All right, we are 2 minutes over. So I want to thank everybody for participating today, and I will check in with Carol Phillips about getting the slides out to you and the best way to do that so that you have that in addition to the handout. And again, I want to encourage everybody to do this exercise that we didn't have time to do in the workshop today, but I think you'll find it very valuable in your creative nonfiction, whether you're going for memoir or autobiography. So any last questions or comments before we?
There was a writer at the beginning, Rachel blah, 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 Kramer.
Oh, Rachel Kramer Bussell.
Oh, could you spell it? So it's Kramer with a K,
Uh-huh.
and then it's
Bussel. I think it's the same. Wait a minute.
okay. That's good enough.
I'll
Thank
look
you.
it up. But if you look up, I'll tell you an easy way to find her is to look up best women's erotica of 2022, or just pick a year. And she is the author or editor, pardon me, of that whole series. And then you can, once you have the exact spelling of her name, it's really easy to find her website anyway. She's
An interesting reading too.
well known. Oh, the erotica series? Yeah. She wrote a blog for my blog post when her new book came out, How to Write Erotica. So that was fun. She's great to talk to. All right. So thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed this, and
Happy Christmas in July.
all right. Happy
Happy
Christmas
Christmas.
to you. Okay.
Thank you, Sarah.
Now,
Thank
Right.
you.
so
Bye-bye.
I think Jody, I'm gonna stop the recording, so if anybody wants to talk after, we're good, but thank you all
Okay.
for attending. Jody, marvelous, great job. And I thought everybody was really good on here today too, so thanks a
Yeah.
lot.
This before, but
Didn't mean to do that, sorry.
you know, I had